95% of the time you think that you have low breast milk supply. Why? Because we are not able to understand how things work when it comes to breastfeeding. Hi, this is Yashika, your nutritionist and a breastfeeding counselor from last 4 years. A lot of DM comes on a daily basis where mother says that I have a low breast milk supply. Very few mothers over here have low breast milk supply, and those mothers are maybe they have undergone a breast surgery, or they have some mental or some physical problems, or maybe some severe diseases. Otherwise, it is just called as perceived low breast milk supply. So the term over here is perceived low breast milk supply. It is not actual low breast milk supply. So in this video we are going to talk about how do you think that it is a low breast milk supply and what can be done to overcome this thought of low breast milk supply. So we are going to understand each and every aspects of what is low breast milk supply. But before that, if you have not subscribed to this channel, do subscribe and hit the bell icon so that whenever I upload the videos you get the notifications. So let's get started. Now this perceived low breast milk supply concept, or maybe you may think that you have a low breast milk supply, always comes in place, or you think about that you have low breast milk supply. The one reason is, even after long duration of breastfeeding, the baby doesn't seem satisfied and the baby is crying or cranky or something like that. And here are the times, the moment at that point of time you give formula, the babies feel contented and satisfied. You feel okay, I have low breast milk supply. But mothers, over here the problem is incorrect positioning and latching. Breastfeeding works on demand and supply, more demand, more supply, but the baby needs to suck it out at the correct place. If baby is not held correctly, which 99% of the cases are such that baby is not held correctly, the baby doesn't suck at the correct place, the baby does not remove correctly, so the demand is not going apt in the breast, that the baby is wanting that milk, and thus you face a low breast milk supply. So the demand is not going by the baby, it has to be always the baby, and the demand is not going, so thus the supply is being adjusted. The more better way the demand goes, more frequently in the first few weeks of life, the more better is the breast milk supply. If you miss out the first few weeks, then of course you will definitely not be able to suffice the need of the baby, because baby's stomach grows gradually, wherein simultaneously your supply should also increase. The second problem over here is no frequent feeds. Now many a times what happens is, for example, you have breastfed for good 40 minutes and still after that you feel that the baby is not contented. You give formula or you give top feed. The baby is sleeping for 3 hours, maybe the amount whatever you give, minimum 2 hours the baby sleeps. So that's how the things are going throughout 24 hours. So for example, in 24 hours initial weeks, the baby needs to stimulate the breast almost 12 to 13 times, which the stimulations occur only 6 times. Sometimes because of late initiation of breastfeeding, you wait until 3, 4, 5 days, assuming that you don't have milk, by pressing the breast. If somebody at the hospital pressed your nipple and say, oh, she is not having breast milk, that is a wrong concept, mothers. Always we have milk. It is the job of the baby to suck the milk out. So even if there is no milk, as declared by any person, the very first thing is, without wasting any more time, even if the baby is on formula on the first few days, there is a need of frequent sucking. So every 1.5 hour or 2 hours of baby coming to the breast and sucking will only help in increasing the supply. Now in sucking, which means correct way of sucking. So late initiation is another problem, so we don't initiate. So ideally it is recommended that the baby should initiate breastfeeding within 30 minutes of birth. Why? Because the baby is very active at that point of time, and the baby learns as soon as the baby comes out that I have to suck it out, and that's what my job is. If the baby is not sucking for first 2 days, which means the baby adjusts himself or herself to what feeding method we are using, and the baby accepts that only. So thus the rejection of the breast also comes in. The fourth point of over here is we fail to understand how breastfeeding works. Now, breastfeeding works in a certain way. We need to understand the difference between formula feeding and breastfeeding. We need to understand the behavior between formula feeding and breastfeeding. There are various techniques which we have to use. There are various techniques wherein we try to wake the baby up, we try to breastfeed the baby, we try to latch them correctly. There are few exercises which we have to give to the baby, and so on. So breastfeeding takes, so learning a breastfeeding technique from an expert makes a lot of difference. There are instances that whosoever have taken support from a professional have a beautiful breastfeeding journey. Earlier there were no such problems, but right now there are so many problems. Why? Because earlier the babies used to, the mother used to get pregnant before even they reach 25 or 26, and now the pregnancy age is nearing 30. So our system is also slowing down. So thus breastfeeding techniques, how breastfeeding work, what is positioning, what is latching, what different position according to the mother's and the baby's body structure needs to be understand. So a breastfeeding expert can help over here. And to be honest, a prior breastfeeding education, which means that even before you deliver, you should be mentally prepared on what all things are going to come. There are so many mothers who think that just as pregnancy, breastfeeding will also be a natural process and it will go as easy as the pregnancy went, but no, mothers, it is not the case. Pregnancy is much more easier. Why? Because the baby is inside the womb and we hardly have to take care of the baby, but soon as the baby comes out, he or she is going to be completely dependent on you. So if at all you are mentally prepared on what will be the expectations of the baby before you deliver, makes a lot of difference. Last is what happens over here is that because you are more shifting onto the formula or early feed. So many a times what happens is you try, but then the baby is always crying. There are people who will come and tell you that, oh, you are not able to satisfy your baby, just give him or her the formula, and that's how we will not understand. But then gradually the baby shifts themselves into formula feeding. Or sometimes what happens, if the baby is formula feeding more and if the baby's immunity is not meeting the demands, the baby's immunity is very low because the baby is not breastfeeding nicely, sometimes what happens is early solid suggestions also come, which means that somebody comes and tell you that you can start the solids, and there again we make a mistake. So first 6 months of life should be exclusive breastfeeding and no other food or drink should be given at that point of time. The fifth problem maybe is giving consecutive amount of top feed or starting early solids. Now many a times what happens is you must have reached up to 3 months and thereafter you start feeling that you have low breast milk supply, where you increase the formula feeding. The moment you increase the top feed, what happens is the baby is not interested in sucking at the breast, the baby slides down, and then again you feel that you have low breast milk supply. And many a times what happens is because of frequent breastfeeding, now it can be due to growth spurt, because of frequent breastfeeding what happens is you think, or maybe the family thinks, that the baby is not getting satisfied via breastfeeding, so they ask you to start solids, maybe some water or some watery foods, and that is again another reason of you leading to a low breast milk supply. So mothers, there are so many 5 problems we have discussed over here, and low breast milk supply is more psychological issue. There is a need to understand how breastfeeding works and what is the difference between top feed and formula feed, and what to expect when you are moving on to the breastfeeding. So that's it for today's video. Hope you got a good insight for this problem. One last thing I would like to say over here is, before experimenting on the baby, because I see a lot of mother experiment on the babies, if you experiment on the babies, they start accepting things, and then changing anything later on becomes very difficult. So rather you experiment, as soon as possible take the help of a professional, because a professional is going to give you and make you understand how breastfeeding works, and that's how you reach your successful breastfeeding goals. So thank you so much for watching this video. If you like this video, please like, share and subscribe, and if you have any other question, you can drop it in the comment section. Thank you. Bye bye.